Welcome to the Prime Property Finance Podcast with Gareth Morgan and Mark Watts. This unique podcast will dive deep into all areas of property investing finance, going behind the scenes with property professionals, investors and clients. Between us, we have 35 plus years experience in property finance. The podcast has been launched to share knowledge, mindset requirements and experiences of successful investors and professionals. We aim to simplify many of the complicated areas of finance and investing and provide valuable and easy to implement tips. Keep an eye out for our new longer episodes every Tuesday and our shorter ones every Friday.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Prime Property Finance Podcast. My name is Mark, and in today's episode, I'd like to chat about problems and solutions. Why is it that we want to talk about that? Well, clearly, we encounter problems and we have to solve them on a day-to-day basis. And never is it more true in property that we forever face various different challenges. Even the most straightforward of transactions always seem to have their little road bumps along the way on that. So I thought it would be useful to have a deeper dive into problems and solutions and what they are. And if you are in property and have come across any problems and solutions, then I guess this should be an insightful episode, or certainly something that will get the brain matter working, that's for sure, on that front. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. So, okay, let's start with looking at what is a problem. Now, you might be thinking, Mark, of course, we all know what a problem is. We get them all the time. However, I just want to try and reframe this slightly differently to help with your thought processes when it comes to being presented with a, inverted commas, problem. Actually, when you take a step back and look at it, problems don't actually exist, okay? Again, I can hear people going, well, they do. We get them all the time. Actually, they don't exist. They're merely a set of circumstances you're presented with. Okay, it's your perception of those circumstances that ultimately creates a problem in your mind. So all you are ever going to be presented with is a set of circumstances that are present at that moment in time. Okay, now that's not taken away from the fact that they may be particularly difficult or challenging set of circumstances. I'm not saying that that's not the case. However, whether it's perceived a problem or otherwise is down to the individual that is absorbing those set of circumstances. Okay, and I can demonstrate this by scenarios whereby you've encountered a set of circumstances that you've seen to be a problem. You've spoken to a friend or a colleague, you've chatted it through to them, and instantly they just suggested a perfect answer to get you through that. And the reason being is because they haven't perceived it as a problem. They've merely observed the set of circumstances and processed them slightly different to the way that you have. Often because there's no emotion involved in it. It could be far more objective. And when you've got that helicopter view, things can look a little bit easier on the outside as well. Obviously, delivering and navigating that set of circumstances is still potentially a challenge. However, as I say, you can demonstrate that by often when you share your problem, somebody else just easily resolves it for you. So it's a little bit like the analogy. It's a very common analogy where you're going from A to B, you're on your path and there's a wall midway through the path, and a lot of people will, because A to B is the most direct route, will try and smash down the wall, get over it, or various bits and pieces, and often take what is a difficult route to solve a problem. Whereas sometimes if we take a step back, you can have a look around. There might be a ladder on the side of the road. There might be a gate in the wall that you weren't actually looking at. You could just walk around it. Various different things. So a lot of time can be wasted trying to solve a particular set of circumstances with one potential solution. Okay. And we see that, and it can create a lot of stress as well, because there's this belief that we're never going to overcome this and so on and so forth. Okay. And don't get me wrong, some sets of circumstances are terminal. You can't navigate through them. You just have to park them and move on and change course and direction and what have you. So as I say, we're not taking away from the circumstances. It's merely how you frame it in your mind is that what creates the problem in the first instance. So stepping back, removing the emotion, these are all things that can help from that perspective. So how can I bring this back to property then? Now, we encounter challenges all of the time where it comes to property. It may be the most straightforward of purchases or refinances, and invariably we will have road bumps along the way that will slow down the process, take us on a different route, different direction, different trajectory. It happens all of the time. The way that we deal with them obviously differs depending on the set of circumstances that we've got. And sometimes we get in our own heads and create our own problems for ourselves. As brokers, we can very often be guilty of following the same path because it worked the last time and actually find that this isn't quite the answer. We need to change how we do things. So as an example, recently, we're working with a client who has managed to negotiate a very good purchase price on a property. So they've been able to source this themselves. It's somebody that they knew that was in a bit of financial difficulty, a ton of equity in the property. They needed to exit the property fairly quickly and in order to resolve some of their financial difficulties. And then our client is in a fortunate position where they could act quickly. They had a number of unencumbered properties in their portfolio. So often when we come to raising finance, if we're not using bridging for speed, the next best is often a refinance. There's far less legal due diligence when it comes to a refinance than there is in a purchase. So we took the route of refinancing an existing property to effectively raise cash, that they're a cash buyer. However, we've encountered a few challenges around this, not through a client's fault. It's just merely a set of circumstances. And it transpires that we can't proceed with this particular property. But it's taken us 3 weeks to find that out through the process that we go through with mortgages. So we've now lost 3 weeks in the process. The reason the client was able to negotiate such a discount is that they promised to complete quickly. That quickly was within 8 weeks, which would have ordinarily been ample time for us to do a refinance. As I said, however, now we are starting again. We've lost effectively 3 weeks in the process, and now the deadline is looking less likely because we've obviously got less time to deliver that. So this is a source of stress for the client, also a source of stress for the seller. On the basis that they are feeling the pressure. There's a risk that this property could default and go into repossession, which then takes this out of the seller's hands and makes it more difficult for the buyer. So, and they obviously want to avoid that as well from a selling perspective. Now, if we continue on the path that we're on, the chances are that we're not going to get this done in time. Therefore, we needed to think differently. So we just took a step back, looked at what is the root cause for the client or for the seller to be so anxious about them getting this done. There was financial difficulty, but they felt as though they were going to struggle to continue to keep up any mortgage payments over the next 2 to 3 months. In fact, they believe that they weren't actually going to be able to pay this month's mortgage payment. So what we've suggested is simply that the buyer exchanges contracts with the seller. Now that means that legally the seller has to sell and the buyer has to buy. So contractually, that transaction is secure. Okay. And as such, then the buyer is going to pay £10,000 to the seller by way of part payment of the deposit. And that means that they can get cash quickly. That then puts them in funds so that they can afford their mortgage payments. And whilst we haven't solved the problem or the set of circumstances immediately, what we have done is inject time back into the process so that we can continue to go down the route of mortgages. Now, whilst we can push mortgages, we aren't entirely in control of the process. We can influence it, absolutely. However, you've got a lender involved, you've got a valuer involved, you've got a solicitor involved, all of whom have got their own pressures and priorities and so on. So we need everybody to do what they need to do quickly to get this into that scenario. So by injecting some time into it, it'll give us some slack in the process. We will still push as hard as we possibly can to get this done in the timescales that were originally set. However, we now have a potential solution should we not be able to deliver this by the end of the month, the next 4 weeks or so. So there's an example of how we took a set of circumstances. The client clearly saw this as a huge problem. What we did was just lay out, okay, what is the root cause to this? And can we fix that in another way rather than just keep pushing and trying to barge down the door, if you like? Whereas that is firmly locked and there's little we can do about that. Can we go and find a different door that gets us to the same place and so on and so forth? So just wanted to share that with you. There are countless challenges that you will have along your property investment journey. And I'm sure if you're already in property, you'll you'll second that as well. Nothing's ever quite as straightforward as it seems in the first instance, nor is it quite as straightforward as people make you think it is. There will be plenty of challenges along the way. Just take the time to not classify everything as a problem. As I say, these are merely a set of circumstances that you're presented with. How you perceive those set of circumstances ultimately determines whether that's going to be a problem and whether you are going to stress over it or whether you're simply going to go, well, here's the next steps that I need to do to knock down each of these different steps along the way to get to the outcome that I'm after. Okay, so that's today's episode. I hope you found it useful. It's all about reframing your challenges into exactly that, circumstances and challenges as opposed to problems. If you are finding that you are coming up against the brick wall, as it were, and you can't overcome some of the challenges, by all means, drop us a line. We're more than happy to have a conversation with you, see if there's other ways we can solve this for you. Have a chat with others in the property network. You'll find that these problems or circumstances, okay, I've been encountered many, many times by other investors. So call upon the property investor community. I'm sure there will be answers in there. Now, obviously, you need to apply they will have their own set of circumstances and how they resolve that, and you may not be able to take that advice. But as I say, it's a great way that you can see that actually this is where the value sits in property, is being able to unpick those circumstances, add your own value by getting things done quickly and efficiently. And that's where you'll hopefully generate most of your value in this process. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you found that useful. And hopefully you have no more problems, just plenty more circumstances. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you have learned something and have some tips to take away. We'd be very grateful if you enjoyed the show. You could give us a review and share with anyone that you know that may be interested. And of course, subscribe to the show so you can get notified when a new episode is released. If you'd like us to answer any questions or go deeper on a specific topic, please drop us a message at primeproperty.finance. See you on the next episode.